All right. Welcome everyone to learning all about dialogue punctuation. I am Jeanette. This is Katie. We've got some people coming in from the chat. We've got Ava from Seattle. We've got Karen from Tulsa. I know a few other people around here, so feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat if you want. And we are going to get started as soon as I can find the share button. Okay.
I swear they changed it where it goes. Oh, yeah, okay.
They put it in green, and I'm like, I'll overlook the green thing, right? That's the
Right.
last thing you'd look at. So, okay. So, welcome to Dialogue Punctuation. This is everything that you would ever want to know, everything your characters and your readers want you to know. And we are very excited that you're here today. So, my name is Jeanette the writer, or Jeanette Smith, you might know me as on LinkedIn. I am a professional editor. I am also a creative writer. I write a lot of dialogue in my own stuff. And just for fun, I'm a recreational mermaid. So you don't think that all I do is sit in front of a computer. And
Okay, yes, I'm Katie Chambers. I'm a developmental editor and copy editor for fiction and nonfiction. I've been kind of dubbed the organizational wizard for two reasons. One, I teach other editors how to organize with systems and processes, how to run their business. But for two, I'm really good at taking nonfiction books that are like very disorganized and reorganizing them, and same with following plot lines. So I've just kind of been noted for that. Um, I am I can't do as many things for fun. Like Jeanette can go off and be a mermaid because I got three kids. I got a 9-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 4-year-old. So when I'm not working, I'm mommying. So yeah. Okay. So we're gonna get started here. We're going to talk about what our goals, what we want to accomplish in this next hour that we have you here. We're going to start off with common vocabulary, just so we kind of all are on the same page. And then we'll get into dialogue situations. We're going to start basic first. So if you're like, "Ugh, I know this, just hang tight because we don't know what level people are coming in at. So it's good to just cover our bases, get the vocabulary out there, and then we're going to move on to different dialogue situations and how you would punctuate those different situations. So when it comes to grammar and punctuation, I know at least some fiction, a lot of fiction authors are like, that is lower on the totem pole of their concerns when it comes to writing craft, which I totally get. Um, and also what's awesome about fiction is you can play with grammar, punctuation, and stylistic rules. You don't have to necessarily follow all the rules. But when it comes to dialogue, it's different. Dialogue has very set, clear rules. They're like, do this, don't play around with it, don't mess with it, or it's confusing. Like, just follow this. So if you have any care of all at all about grammar or punctuation, this is the one to kind of you want to nail because it's you don't play with this when you follow the rules here. And you don't want to pull your readers out of the story. So
So, talking about that common vocab, the first thing that we want to make clear is what is terminal punctuation. Terminal punctuation indicates the end of a grammatical sentence, and you can use multiple punctuation marks for this. So a period, exclamation point, a question mark, those are common. You can even use an em dash, but the comma and the semicolon, those are not terminal punctuation. They don't end sentences, they connect things. So when we talk about what type of punctuation is needed in different scenarios, we may use the term terminal punctuation, which means that you need a type of punctuation that ends the sentence. So just make sure that you kind of know what is terminal, what is not. We're also going to use the words dialogue tag or speaker tag, sometimes I say. This means that there is a noun or a pronoun with a verb. So he said, Sally asked, the man over there yelled, that kind of thing. That is a dialogue tag that indicates how the dialogue is being brought forth, right? One of the things that people kind of argue with, but we insist on in the editing community, is that that verb needs to be a verb of utterance. That means that it is a word that indicates something is spoken aloud, right? You can't shrug words. You can't sigh words. You can maybe laugh a couple words, but probably not a whole sentence, right? So you want to be careful with those verbs you're choosing for your dialogue tag, because if it's not a verb of utterance, then what you actually have is an action beat. So an action beat is a completely separate sentence from the dialogue that is usually description, narration, something like that, but it is not dialogue. It is treated as a separate sentence. And so the dialogue in that case is always going to need a terminal punctuation mark. So we've come right back around. Okay, so these are the four terms that we want to keep in mind as we're going through this presentation. I also believe that probably everyone on this call knows what these marks are, but I am going to give you their uses in dialogue because some of them are used specific ways for dialogue. So commas indicate like a pause, but a continuation of an idea or a sentence. In dialogue, that would also include the continuation of using a speaker tag. So we're going to show a lot of commas. Periods, of course, end things abruptly. It's terminal punctuation, so we're going to have action beats in dialogue, usually with terminal punctuation. M dashes have a lot of uses in just narration, but in dialogue, they're almost always used for interruption. So you're indicating that something is being sort of cut off. An ellipsis, on the other hand, is more of a gradual trailing off, kind of a you just stop talking kind of thing, right? So a little bit of a difference between those two punctuation marks when it comes to dialogue. Exclamation marks, I like to think that they indicate either volume or intensity of what's being said. I also highly advocate for using them sparingly. I personally treat them like curse words. If people hear me say a curse word, they know I'm mad. And that's because I don't use them that often because I want them to have meaning and punctuate my sentence really hard when I say them. So that's how I think of exclamation marks as well, is to sort of think of them as just sparingly. Quotation marks, we're going to be using a lot of those. In American editing, we use double quotation mark on either side. In the UK and Europe, it could be different. Sometimes they use single quotation marks instead. For us in American English, the single quotes would go inside the double quotes. If you're doing it the opposite way for European standards, then you would use the single quotes out and the double quotes in. All of the advice that we are giving in this presentation is based on American English and US publishing standards. We are using the Chicago Manual of Style 18th edition, which came out in 2024, so it's very, very new comparatively. And also we have drawn on the Chicago Guide to Copy Editing Fiction by Amy J. Schneider, wonderful book for copy editors. And these are the references that your professional copy editors are looking at and using when they're going through your manuscript. So that is what we've drawn on to give you the advice here today. So now we are going to get to the examples. Okay, Katie. Katie, I think your mic went off.
Oh, yeah, I turned it off when my kids came in the door from a friend's house. My bad. Back on. So we're gonna start basic here with dialogue alone. What you want to be careful of is the terminal punctuation goes inside the quotation marks. So I didn't want to do that today. Period, then closing quotation mark, not closing quotation mark, then period. Same with the question mark, same with the exclamation mark, inside. Now we're going to talk about the difference between em dashes and ellipses kind of in practice here. I didn't want to do that. See, he's being cut off. That's where we use the em dash. Maybe he's being cut off because somebody else, or he or she is being cut off, or they, because somebody else interrupts them. Or it could be a sound is interrupting them. It doesn't have to be a person. Or they could be interrupting themselves. You know, we do this. We sometimes start talking and then, I don't know, if you have mom brain, you start talking, then you think of your child and you stop talking. And so it happens. What that happens is a interruption is an em dash here. The ellipses, however, is more like trailing off or not so much as being hard stop interrupted. Um, so you either are like don't want to finish the thought because you don't like what's coming up next, or you don't want to say it, or you don't want to admit it, or you just are going to leave the question hanging. It's just that dot 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 is trailing off speech. In Chicago Manual of Style, the way we do the ellipses is you can see there's a space after that and before the first period, and then there's a space between each of them. That is Chicago Manual of Style. However, there are author preferences that sometimes come into play with how they want to style their ellipses. So the main thing to know is it is for trailing off speech, not for hard stop interrupted speech. Now, when your dialogue tag comes before your quotation mark, I mean, sorry, not quotation mark, your quote, your dialogue, you have your dialogue tag, the comma that Jeanette talked about, and then your dialogue in quotation marks. Okay, so when the dialogue tag comes before, you always need a comma after it, then the quote, and notice the terminal punctuation, that period is inside the quotation mark. Now, occasionally you might use colons. Colons are often used in nonfiction to introduce like a quote when they're quoting someone else. So think of this as like you're giving, maybe your character's reading a sign, or they're reading a speech, or they're reading a declaration or a proclamation. When they're doing that, they're kind of quoting someone else, so to speak. So you can use that colon there. You don't have to, that's a stylistic choice, but you do need at least a comma, or you need something. There has to be punctuation there and not a period. Not a period. You do not put a period after your dialogue tag. It's a comma or a colon. Now, if the dialogue tag comes after, at the end, um, same thing here. You have to have a comma separating your tag from your dialogue. That comma's there. But now, notice how when the dialogue tag is at the end, we still have that comma inside the closing quotation mark. Punctuation is still going inside, right? And then we have our period afterwards. Notice that she said the S is lowercase. The tag is still part of the sentence, just like it was when it started the sentence. We capitalize Lauren, obviously, and Lauren said because Lauren's a proper noun here. And you'll see in all four examples, with the commas, the question mark, and the exclamation mark, they're all inside. And then you have your tag. Now notice there's not a comma after that question mark and after that exclamation mark.
Brinley, check dishwasher needs to be empty.
I think your mic went off again, Katie.
Check if dishwasher
I'm
needs to be
so
empty.
sorry. My Alexa's reminding my kids to do their chores. I turned off my mic because I'm like, you don't need to hear my kids' announcements. I forgot to turn off my Alexa in my office. I'm sorry. Anyway, hopefully my kids are so obedient and they're doing their chores right now. Anyway, um, notice that you don't have a comma after the question mark and after the exclamation mark. There, that punctuation is serving to separate you from your tag. But still, notice after that question mark, I did not capitalize she on the she asked. It's still part of the sentence, even though I have a question mark at the end of the dialogue. You do that to indicate that the dialogue is a question. Now, Chicago Manual of Style does say if your punctuation at the end of your dialogue is an ellipses, that dot, 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 you can also use a comma. That's a stylistic preference. You can say, I don't like that. I don't want to use that. But that one is the only time it's okay. It is not okay after that. But why did you do that question mark and then having a comma between your tag? No, you just use your question mark and you just use your exclamation mark. Okay, now sometimes we have a dialogue tag and then we have extra information after that. The extra information is punctuated the same as it would be if it were just a normal sentence without that dialogue tag. So if we took out she said and we just had I didn't want to do that today, you would have comma turning away from him because comma is a participial phrase and we put our commas there. That is why you'll see that there's a comma after she said and a comma before she said. I have to have the comma separating the quote from the tag, but now I need another comma separating my main clause from the participle phrase, because that is the grammar rule. But then if you look at the second one, there's only a comma before Lauren said. There's not a comma afterwards because we don't need a comma before as she turned away. It's not functioning adverbally here, so you don't have a comma. When your tag goes in the middle. If your first part of the quote is a complete sentence, or the quote by itself is complete, I'm quite busy. That's a complete thought. Notice I have a period after she said. And then I continue with the rest of the quote. And I didn't want to do that today because I have two separate sentences there, two separate lines of dialogue with the tag being in the middle. But in the next one, I wonder if it's possible we could not do that today. That is the whole complete sentence. I wonder is not the complete sentence. So I have a comma before the dialogue tag, and then I have a comma after the dialogue tag because it's coming in between the sentence. It's not ending the sentence. I wonder is not a complete sentence. So that's why we have commas on both sides of that tag in the middle.
So that was all like dialogue tags, right? But we also have those action beats that I talked about. So action beats are always treated as separate sentences. I didn't want to do that today. Period, quotation mark. We're ending with that terminal punctuation and we're starting a brand new sentence. She hit the table with her fist. That is because we don't have any verb of utterance there, right? We can't like speak through hitting something, or at least we shouldn't. Same thing if your action beat comes before your dialogue, you would still set it off as a separate sentence. She started crying. Then you start your dialogue. But why did you do that? Question mark, close dialogue. So pretty simple. Before or after, you just treat them as if they are separate sentences. But sometimes we like to have our action in the middle of the sentence. And this is where things get a little trickier. So this depends, kind of like Katie was showing in that last example where the speaker tag was in the middle. Part of it depends on whether or not what comes before and after the action complete one sentence. So in this first example, I don't understand, period, quotation mark. It's a one single sentence. I don't understand. That's a complete thought. She started crying. We have that action. And then why did you do that? Question mark. Completely separate sentence. So we're going to punctuate all three of them as completely separate sentences. If the action happens concurrently with the dialogue, then you can possibly use em dashes outside of the quotation marks. So the way that you would like kind of imagine this middle one right here is, I didn't want to do that today, right? I didn't stop talking, but I did the action. And so, well, you can't see it very well, but I hit my desk. But you know what I'm saying? So we've got this action that is happening at the same time as the words. So we're not going to end what's in the dialogue. We're only going to put in an action between some em dashes. If, however, there is a sort of break in the speech, the person does actually stop and then restart. In that case, you would want an em dash inside of the punctuation mark, and you would restart the next part of the dialogue where they continue their thought with an em dash and a lowercase letter. So I didn't want to, the door slammed at that moment. Do that, right? So we imagine kind of a pause. I didn't want to do that. So that is kind of how we're reading that dialogue, which means that the actual speech was interrupted. Therefore, we need that em dash inside. If that happens concurrently, those em dashes can go outside.
Okay, now when you have a quote within a quote, this is someone is speaking and now they're repeating what someone else says, so they're quoting them. In American English, we use our double quotation marks for the first quote and then single quotation marks for the one inside. In British English, it's actually reversed. But so we have at first, comma, right? Because I have um, a dialogue tag. She said, notice I didn't close the quotation marks after at first. It's not the end of the quote. So I have at first, she said. The reason why I have she said is part of the quotation mark. She's saying at first she said this. I'm not using a dialogue tag there. I'm saying that this is part of what she said. At first she said, what did she say first? I don't understand. And started crying. That is spoken entirely. That whole thing was one person talking, saying, at first she said, I don't understand, and started crying. Okay. That is why we punctuated that way. The single quotation mark are now indicating I'm now quoting somebody else. Same with the other one, but now look at the other one. The other one has the quote coming at the end. So what we have to do there, we open the quote, and then she said, single quotation mark, because we're going to quote her. I didn't want to do that today. End that single quotation mark, and then we got to end the double quotation mark too, because we got to end the whole quote. You always have to come in pairs. So then it will look like you have three kind of apostrophes there, but one's closing your single quotation mark, one's closing your double quotation mark. Okay, so that's how you do a quote within a quote.
You might also have dialogue that extends over multiple paragraphs. The validity of doing this from an editorial standpoint is, questionable. It could work, it could not. But if you do this, there are strict rules for it. So what you're going to do is we're going to imagine that first one was a long piece of dialogue. We started open with a quote. I won't say it again. We're going to do it whether you like it or not, period. Then I've clearly had too much dialogue in one paragraph, but the speaker keeps going. So I don't close the quotation mark, but I do go down a line and then I restart the quotation mark to indicate that this is the continuation of the quote. At the end of that, I would close that quotation mark. As you can kind of see on the screen, it kind of just looks like a mistake when you have small pieces of dialogue that you break up over two lines. So I really only recommend breaking quotes or dialogue over multiple paragraphs if the person really has to monologue that. So just consider that, like, where to break it for your reader's eyes. How are they gonna, pace through this dialogue? And if you need to do multiple paragraphs, you would open all the paragraphs and only close the last one.
Now we have non-dialogue. This isn't actually dialogue, but it's in quotation marks because it's indicating how her body screamed. Her body language screamed, I don't want to do that. Okay, she's not actually speaking, I don't want to do that. So we don't have a comma. This isn't a verb of utterance, right? We're not having a dialogue tag, and then these are the words she said. But we still put it in quotation marks because it's how her body was conveying that information. Okay, so it also completes the, I don't want to get too technical, but the real reason it completes the it's the object of the verb. Okay, so we don't want to separate it with a comma. But just know here that it's not a verb of utterance, it's not your dialogue tag. Same with the next one. He would tell me this. Not a verb of utterance. I'm not saying he said we're going to do that. I said he would tell me. So I don't have that comma. It's not a dialogue tag. But notice I do have my quotation marks around we're going to do that, the single quotation mark, because I'm quoting him inside of my whole statement that I'm making there.
And just to add on to this slide, I have to look up this rule every time. It is page 164 in the Chicago Guide to Copy Editing Fiction. And I read it and I read it and I read it and I still go, okay, I hope I got it right, and move on. So,
yeah, like when to put in the comma and when not to. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so the stuff that isn't dialogue but is quoted as dialogue is very weird. So if this one is confusing, don't feel bad. Like I was talking about when I was introducing the punctuation, we can use punctuation to show things being cut off, which also includes things like stuttering. So hyphens can be used between repeated letter sounds. In that first example, but I didn't want to do the that today. We would like notice how with the but, we are only repeating the be, but with the want and the that, we're repeating the whole like word, the letter sound, not just the individual letters, because we wouldn't say I didn't want to do that. You can't kind of, it's a whole sound. So just be aware when you put that hyphen. But if you want to have someone stutter, hyphens are the way to do it. If you are separating entire words, then that, according to Chicago Manual of Style, can be done with either a hyphen, an M dash, or an N dash. So you get to choose which one you want. So as you can see in the second example, I have chosen the M dash to separate single words. I've also capitalized it because it is a proper word that we need to capitalize. So just keep that in mind when you are doing any sort of like stuttering or broken speech of any sort.
Now, spoken punctuation. Sometimes we speak punctuation. You need to spell that out because we're talking it. You know, if you put in just the quote, it doesn't register. So I don't care if you quote unquote don't want to do that. I've also seen sometimes my authors will say, I don't care, and then they'll do an action beat. She used the quote symbol. She did, or I don't know how they worded it exactly, but like she did the double quotes. So then they're doing it as an action beat. But still, it's being spelled out because we're not using it as a quotation mark. We're actually using the word here. So quote, unquote, don't want to do that. Or this is my girlfriend slash person who doesn't like to do that. Slash, we don't put air quotes. Thank you, Karen. Air quotes. The word was just not coming to me. I'm like, I know there's a more elegant way to put this. But slash is a punctuation mark, but they're actually speaking the punctuation mark, so you spell out the word slash.
Okay, now it is practice time for you. And you don't have to do this obviously right now. But if you want to either scan this QR code or go to this website, you will find download buttons for a short homework assignment that has individual sentence and then a longer section as well that we have, of course, messed up all the punctuation on. There's an answer key, and there's also on that page the slides of this presentation so that you can reference all of these examples as you're doing that homework. So feel free to do that. Keep your camera out, because there's also another resource that you can use if you are interested in having a like quick reference guide. You don't want to have the slides on your computer. I do offer a free cheat sheet on my website, and that entire yellow column on the left, all of that is the dialogue punctuation rules we just went over. So I will call her out on here. Karen has hers printed and hanging above her desk, and I'm so proud of it. So it is very handy, I promise. But I am not the only one with resources. Your mic, Katie.
Now a reminder was going off for me. I've got to remember, I have 1,000. Alexa's my brain, okay? And because I have my phone on silent, Alexa reminds me when I've got to do stuff and then when my kids got to do stuff, and I'm so sorry. I need to remember to turn off my Alexa. I keep muting myself so you don't hear the Alexa. But anyway, I have a lot of self-editing resources. I'm a teacher at my heart. I was an English teacher for years. That is who I am at my core. So on my website, I have paid and free resources covering every stage from drafting to revising to publishing to marketing to just kind of help you with all things that you need to do with your book. But my self-editing resources, I do have a section on that resource center that's specifically for self-editing. And I'm currently working on publishing 2 books, a self-editing for nonfiction authors and a self-editing for fiction authors. I want to give a shout out to Ava for being one of my alpha readers really, because it was my very first draft. Then I had her read it, and I've been self-editing it like crazy now because I've got a lot of ways to improve it. But I'll have those books available, and they will be on my site, and they will cover everything we covered here, and plus a whole lot more on how you can improve your books.
But we are not just a camera website away. We are totally here for you if you have questions. You can find both of us on LinkedIn, where we are very active. Here are our email addresses. You can email either one of us. They're also included at the end of the homework. So if you can just click on them there. There's our websites if you want to learn more about our services or see any more of our resources. There are tons everywhere. That was everything. Thank you all so much for listening to us. I had a lot of fun. I don't know about you. I am going to, at this point, stop the share so we can all kind of see each other. And then if anyone has questions, please do either throw it in the chat or feel free to come off mute or raise your hand on your video or whatever you would like to do.
I will just say that Ava asked a question, and the slide didn't have a comma after she said. At first, she said, "I don't understand," and started crying. And then she
Yeah,
said,
that's one of those places where it seems like direct address to me, like it's the object of the verb, not an actual quote. But I question that. I think I probably took it out and put it back in a million times. So I would say that's one where you wouldn't be harmful to put it there. And I don't know if someone would really question it if it was gone either, or if it would technically be wrong. So yes, that one is confusing. I totally agree.
and it's just because it's that situation that I was explaining later on, which is the whole her body wasn't actually speaking, but those were the words there, and it was like completing the sentence. That one's kind of like Jeanette said, does it follow that CMOS rule that she says is on page 164? Does it not? I personally would put a comma in those specific ones. The screaming at the body one, I wouldn't. But at first she said, comma, I don't understand. That's how I would punctuate it, um, personally. But you're not. Yeah, I mean, if you want to play it safe, go ahead and put the comma there. But I think Jeanette's saying that that's that 164 rule that's so tricky. Is that what that one is?
Yeah, so I'm looking at page 164, and one of the examples that I think I probably went off of to make the decision on that slide is this example where it says, he would say weird things like, give me your eyebrows, as if they were completely normal. And I turned that into a quote, right? Like a piece of dialogue where he was saying this is being said, but you don't put commas around that because that is the object of the verb he would say. So that it's just one of those things, right? Where it's very specific and weird. And I read this page so many times. It's like falls open to that page when I open it. So
But to your point, Karen and Ava, and I think Jeanette was saying this too, if you put the comma there, that's great. Like no one's gonna be like, why do you have a comma after she said? Because that's normal. You know what I mean? So I don't think you're not gonna look, it's not gonna look like an error, and it isn't if you're not using Chicago Miami style and you're not following it strictly. And that's the thing. You don't have to, that one's one of the, we started this presentation by saying like there are exact rules for dialogue, and that is true. But as editors ourselves, we look up that one a lot. And I think in the editing world, in the editing community, there might be debate on how to interpret that and what that means. So for your purposes, if you feel better with the comma there, do it. Like I feel better with the comma there personally. That my body screamed, I wouldn't put a comma in that one, but I would after the she said.
Christine, I see your question here is quote unquote one of those things that could be in italics instead. Maybe the thing that I think of when I see italics in dialogue is that they somehow emphasized it with their voice. I don't necessarily get that they emphasized it with their hands. So if you truly want like someone like to indicate that your character is doing this as they're speaking, I would somehow indicate either put quote unquote like they said it out loud, Or like Katie was saying, you can say afterward, you can have like they use the air quotes, right? So totally up to you. I'm not sure I would interpret italics as a quote unquote, but if you start the pattern in your writing and people start to understand it, perfect, right? Like if it makes sense to you and you're consistent with it, go for it.
Yeah, my thing with italics, what I've had to work with a lot of my authors on, is if you use italics for too many things, it becomes unclear what the is being used for. So, if you have a lot of internal dialogue that's not in free indirect speech form, so it's got to be in italics, and then you also have emphasis in italics, and then you also have this in italics, it might be a little confusing on what the italics are indicating. And plus, italics can get hard to read if you have a lot of it. So the first use of italics to me is when they're thinking and you're not using free indirect speech. The second being emphasis, and that other use would be like stylistic.
Yeah. Okay, Karen is asking, when someone is thinking something, how does it work with quotation marks or is it italics only? Katie, how do you approach this one?
I do italics only when how should I say it? When that's the author preference, I guess. I prefer it that way. That's my preference, is italics only. But I do know that it is very common to use the quotation mark and the italics for thoughts. I think if you don't use the he thought, she thought tag, that can get misleading. So I prefer to do just italics.
Yeah, I'm much the same. I think without the tags, you definitely would want italics. You can also use it as an opportunity to try and go into what's called deep point of view.
Free indirect
So,
speech. Is
yeah,
that what
so
you're talking about? Yeah. Yeah.
instead of saying, aw crud, he thought you just put aw crud and no italics, and you just assume that the reader understands that is the narration from the character. Your
Yeah.
character is narrating that word. So what that does is, without those filter words, he thought, we're more immediately in his mind. We're not looking at him, we're being him. So one of those things where you can do a lot of different things. I mean, we didn't get into everything that could be done with non-dialogue dialogue, because there's also the idea of telepathy. There's the idea of
Yeah.
sign language, right? Like, so these are specific use cases that you maybe would have to go out and find some current examples of, see how current authors are treating this, go to a style guide that has specific recommendations for that. So like a conscious style guide for, perhaps signing characters. So there are options for that, but we didn't get into them because they're very specific.
Yeah. I would say, me personally, I agree with Jeanette. I would do the crud as like a free indirect speech where you drop the italics, you drop the he thought, and it's just blended seamlessly into their narration. Um, People can understand that crud is a thought, right? Like, I don't know anyone who would read that and think that that's not a thought. So I don't think the he thought or the italics are really needed. I'm kind of a minimalist when it comes to italics, so I only use them as thoughts when they're rendered in first person and my narration is third person. So I like have, kind of flag that change there, but crud doesn't have first or third person going on in it. So you don't even need the italics and you don't need the he thought tag. And when you said, Aisha, when you said you have dark voice whispers and thoughts, and one's italics, no quotation marks, and one's italics with quotation marks. Jeanette said, if you do establish a pattern, they might be able to pick up on that. If I were editing your book, I might suggest another way to indicate the difference. I had one book where they did a lot of telepathy, and then they also had straight up internal thoughts. So one was telepathically speaking, one was thoughts. And we actually we applied a different style to the telepathy thinking. It was kind of like a block kind of looking style. It wasn't totally block. It's kind of hard to explain, but it was a clear style that every time you saw that, that was the telepathy speaking as opposed to internal thoughts. So we used a total different style entirely because we were no, and for the most part, your readers would probably follow that pattern, but I got nervous at the beginning that they would get confused and think it was a mistake that some of her italicized words had quotation marks and some of them didn't, because at the beginning, the way that it was rendered, it was a little confusing. So we kind of distinguished it more clearly.
Yeah, I think as long as you kind of lead your reader the first few times with those filter words, he thought with the, or like the voice spoke to me with the italics and the quotation marks. And then the very next time you use italics and quotation marks, you can leave off the voice spoke to me
Yes.
and people will understand. So establish the pattern clearly. The other thing with styles is that you can think of other styles, especially for robotic things. Imagine more like typewriter type text, or like
Yeah.
not typewriter, like that execute, right? The when you pull up
Code looking. Yeah.
the code looking text or whatever, you could change your font of someone's dialogue or the way that you're expressing something. You can also use small caps. Small caps is a style that you can create in Word. You like highlight it and make it small caps via the Word document options. So you have a few more options of ways of differentiating things that don't just involve quotation marks and italics. So consider that you have like people are doing all sorts of options nowadays. So you can again start your own pattern, and as long as it works, it would work. Um,
But I
yeah,
do have to
same
say,
with
I
text
agree with,
messages.
oh, sorry.
Sorry, Dora just said same with
Oh,
text messages. I did actually recently edit a memoir, and I was told by the publisher, please put all of the text messages in small caps. So that is what they chose for that book.
yeah. Every time I've had a text message or a code, I edited a book where the guy was a hacker. The main character was a hacker. There was a lot of code. Um, I I actually do a completely different font. So I do a different font for text. I do a different, and I just call the style text. And I put in a placeholder font because I don't know what the designer is actually going to want to change it to, but it's just a different font so that the author and I can both see this is a text message or this is code. And then whatever font you end up going with when your interior designer works on it is fine. I did want to just go back to, I wanted to emphasize what Jeanette said because that was amazing. Very powerful answer. Good job, Jeanette. Was that she said, like, you initially have those thought tags to delineate that, this is how I'm styling thoughts, and then you can drop them. And then that does kind of make it clearer when you're having your dark voice whispers versus your thoughts, unless the dark voice whispers are also using thought tags. And then that's when you'd want to maybe have a different font.
Yeah. I would imagine PA announcements would be small caps worthy, I think, because that's kind of
Yeah.
mechanical, not really voicey. So, yeah, but do what feels right. Tim, I see your hand up. Feel free. You can unmute.
I have two, hopefully just quick questions. One, when we're using, I've read sometimes either like in a blog article, whatever, you should always just use said, never anything else. So is there a rule of thumb to when it be like she whispered or Sarah yelled or he screamed versus always just using said? And my second question is, I've seen things where the dialogue might be like, hey, why don't we, or like, hey, would you like to go for a car ride? He said. Shouldn't that be he asked? I mean, if the dialogue is a question, shouldn't the tag be asked and not said?
I love your questions. They make me so giddy. This is
I'm
what I
gonna let
like to
Katie
talk
go
about.
first then, because yes, go, Katie, go.
I wanted to say that earlier, but we were focusing on punctuation, so I like bit my tongue. But technically, as long as it's a verb of utterance, it is a dialogue tag. There are different schools of thought on this. I happen to belong in the camp of if you start using all those creative tags, it kind of pulls readers out of the moment, because it draws attention to the word. It draws attention to the fact that the story's being told. Said is one of those words that just kind of disappears in the background, as readers, because we've seen it so much that it doesn't draw an emphasis. But if you have, like, I'm gonna use this example. I had a guy who just loved to say he ejaculated all the time when in his dialogue tag, and I'm like, I can't, I just can't. Please, you said. Um, so I always encourage my authors, but it's their choice because technically, if it's a verb of utterance, you can use it as a dialogue tag. It is their choice, but I encourage them to stick to said, whispered, yelled. And you only need yelled and whispered, I feel like, if the words itself don't make it clear that it was yelled or whispered. That to me is more indicating how something was said. So I'm okay with, okay, let's let them know it was a whisper. Unless, the words make it clear. I've had some dialogue tag where they said she screamed, and I'm like, yeah, we got that from the fact that she went like, yeah, H. And I'm like, you don't need to say she screamed, right? Like that said it. But I'm okay with yelled, screamed, whispered. But when you start, I don't know, people they think that said is boring. I think the other school of campus that said is boring, and they're trying to be creative and they're trying to engage their reader and keep variety. I'm a huge variety person. Like, I don't eat the same food ever. Like, I love variety, okay? But when it comes to tags,
And
you don't need
and
that.
I want to pick up on that right there because I think it also comes down to the idea of intention,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
Some people who use tags other than said their intent is to look creative. I personally don't think that's a very good reason to use a creative tag. However, if someone truly shouts something and you don't want to put an exclamation point, you can say the dialogue, comma, quotation mark, she shouted. And I will understand that that dialogue was said specifically in a loud shouting voice. If you then have she shouted for like every other dialogue after that, it's going to start being weird. So it's one of those things. Think of it like the exclamation point or like cuss words, right? You want to purposefully put them where you want because somebody is saying it in a specific way. If they're literally just saying something, then just literally have them say something, he said. And Tim, also to that second question, I think, yes, you are correct. When I see things like question marks, it's clearly a question, but he said, I will either change that or just take it out because the question mark indicates that they asked something. So it's a little bit redundant in that case. It's that depends a little on the author's style, whether I will take it out or not. But yeah, for sure, you want to have the correct type of tag with the correct type of punctuation.
Yeah, for me, the question mark definitely makes it clear that it is a question. Um, and oftentimes people over tag anyway, so half the time you don't even need she said or she asked, just take it out because it's clear who's speaking on that line. But oh my gosh, Ash, I feel for you. She just said one of her
Yeah,
clients refused to use said.
that would be a tough one for me, for sure.
I'm all the opposite. I'm like, can you please just use said? And my clients know this. I'll go in and I'll change them unless they're intentional. Like I do leave some alone that it's like, okay, I see the purpose for this one. But other than that, it's like you don't need to be creative. They literally just like Jeanette said, they said this. So let's just
So
say she
what
said
you
and move
can
on.
do, you can go pick up a book in the genre of the book that you are writing or editing and go look at that dialogue and see how they're doing it, right? Like it's like okay, so but what I mean is you can physically like look through the dialogue and count how many sentences are there, how many of them have dialogue tags, how many dialogue tags are just said, asked, whatever versus something more. If you read a few pages of dialogue in a book that's already published and you look at those things, that's where you can kind of get the idea of, okay, I see in my genre that it's okay to use verbs of utterance that are more creative sometimes, but maybe it's only like 1 per 10 seds, something like that. So you can kind of figure out what is okay or what is done currently in your genre by going and looking at current books and seeing what they do as well.
Words should
Okay.
be uttered in a sigh. So how would you say someone sighed? Oh man, I always treat sighed as a action beat. I would put a period.
I do. So I'm a little bit of the other camp. I do believe with short phrases, you can sigh them. So for me, it would be like, oh man, right? To me, that's a
Oh, okay,
side,
that's
oh
fair.
man, right? But if you were like telling me a whole sentence with like 15 words and saying he sighed, that one I would then change to an action beat. So for me, it's very dependent on can you like try it yourself, right? If you want to know if it's an action or beat versus a verb of utterance, go and do it yourself out loud and see if it creates a verbal sound.
Let's give Jeanette a round of applause for her acting ability. The moment you said the way you did, oh man, I was like, oh, I can see you signing that. But I think a lot of the times when I'm reading, I think the reason why side really got to me is I've had a lot of authors recently that it was clearly an action beat. Like they weren't, it was like after they said the sentence, they're like, oh, you know? And I'm like, stop sighing your words. And so I recently just wrote this whole thing that we don't sigh words. And so I had that in my head. But Jeanette sighed her word beautifully. Like, get your Golden Globe Award nominee. I don't know what the actor world award is.
I'll take it. I'll take it. That's good. Yeah, so I think sighing and also like laughing, right? Like you could maybe laugh a couple words like don't do that, right? But you're not going to laugh like a 15-word sentence, right? So there are certain times when a verb of utterance can be a little bit also an action beat, but it's people don't often make the distinction. So again, it's about intention. Did they sigh the words or did they say the words and then sigh? So
Yes.
all about
Yeah.
intention.
When you're using it purposely, like you're like, I want them to say these words, as opposed to just, I thought this was a verb of utterance and I don't know the difference. That's a different thing.
Yeah. Unless you're maniacally laughing. Yeah, hard to talk through maniacal laughing. That's
I don't know,
just its own
Jeanette. Give us your
dialogue
acting
already.
chops.
Oh God, no, not that one.
I want to see it.
I do have a lot of different laughs. It's well known that I laugh into a lot of different ways based on
I've
what you
heard
just
them.
told me. Okay, we have like a couple minutes left before we reach the top of the hour. So if we have any final questions, please do throw them in the chat or put your hand up. But other than that, I do want to say from the bottom of our hearts, thank you for joining us today. To have, anyone at all, honestly, on a Friday night is just wonderful. So, and to see faces that I know and people who are, colleagues and friends, it's just awesome. So thank you so much for supporting us. It's really been awesome.
I've enjoyed myself. Break from the kids. I'll take it.
Okay, sounds good. So we are going to go ahead and stop the recording. So thank you everyone who is seeing the recording. And if you have questions, please do email us, get with us on LinkedIn, go to our websites. We are just a smoke signal away, I promise.